皆さんこんにちは。背番号100番ベースボールコーチのアレックスでございます。皆さんお元気でいらっしゃいますでしょうか。いろんなことありました。大統領が変わりました。いろんなことあったんですけれども、今日はですね、素晴らしい大統領トランプがですね、国のために4年間素晴らしいことをやってくれたのを称えたいと思っております。彼はですね、本当にね、デモクラティックと言いますか、民主党のね、すごい痛い目にあって、それでも耐えてすごいことやってくれたことを私はここで皆様に伝えたいと思います。ここの OAN というテレビ局なんですけど、One American News ということで、こちらでまとめてますんで、まあ、簡単に申し上げますとね、過去4年間、トランプ大統領やメディアと両方の政党から攻撃を受けてきました。しかし彼はまた誰も考えていなかったことを私たちの国のためにやってくれました。今私たちは大統領の努力と私たちの国のために犠牲にしてくれたことを称えたいと思います。For the past 4 years, President Trump has been attacked by media and both political parties, but also did more for our country than everyone thought. Now we celebrate the moment of acknowledging the effort of the president and sacrifice for our country he did. He is the best president for the United States. Now we have a new president, but we want acknowledge his hard work, and it starts right now, right here. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you the American president, Mr. Donald J. Trump. Here we go.
The America of 2021 is very different from the America of 2017. In just 4 short years, our country has been transformed, experiencing some of the greatest prosperity in the history of our nation. That is, until the Chinese virus was unleashed and both Democrats and Republicans imposed tyrannical and unconstitutional lockdowns, grinding our nation's progress to a halt. These last 4 years haven't been an easy journey. The nation is still struggling under divisive politicians from both sides of the aisle who put their own personal interests above those of the people they serve. But in spite of that divisiveness and the negative rhetoric and the vicious attacks from the media, in spite of the hatred and the lies of the radical left, President Donald Trump has never stopped fighting for the American people. President Trump set out to change America, to bring hope back to the American people, and that's exactly what he did. He promised to bring an end to the 8 years of fear-mongering and crippling stagnation ushered in by Obama and his administration. And President Trump did it all while battling Democrats and Republicans to bring order back to our nation. All the while, radical leftists like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer used every trick in the Democrat playbook to try and slow him down. But nothing they did could stop the president from accomplishing his goals. And so we here at One America News want to take a moment and look back at everything President Trump has achieved and thank him for his hard work serving the American people.
My administration has moved with urgency and historic speed to confront problems neglected by leaders of both parties over many decades.
President Trump has stood up for our heroes every day. He stood by our law enforcement, our military, and the freedoms we hold dear. He's made good on his promise to put America first.
President Trump's stunning successes have come despite an onslaught from the rabid left-wing media, which has maintained a one-sided perspective from day one. Yet President Trump has still managed to turn the economy around, hit record unemployment lows, create historic top. President Trump made a lot of big promises before he took office. Promises many Democrats and the media didn't think that he could keep.
I will tell you, there has never been an administration, and I'm very proud of this, that's done more than the Trump administration in the first 2 years of office.
But while that's just talk, for most politicians, not only has President Trump done what he said he'd do, he's far exceeded anything anyone thought possible. Let's take a look at some of those promises and see how he did. During his campaign, President Trump said that he would donate his salary back to our country, slash federal regulations, repeal the harmful NAFTA agreement, ban White House officials from lobbying for foreign governments, suspend immigration from terrorist-prone countries, appoint new judges to the Supreme Court, move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, limit legal immigration, call on NATO members to pay their fair share to the alliance, put an end to Obamacare's individual mandate, call off the disastrous Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership, reform the EPA, expand America's energy sector, cancel the Paris Climate Agreement, protect our religious freedoms, raise tariffs on goods imported into America, stop American companies from leaving the U.S., build a wall along our southern border, reform the Department of Veterans Affairs, and restore America's military to the most powerful in the world. So after promising all that, how do President Trump's promises stack up against his achievements? Well, President Trump didn't just stop at accomplishing everything on that list. He's done much, much more. While Obama made promises like phasing out incandescent light bulbs, President Trump has focused more on the big picture, like protecting Americans from terrorists immigrating from dangerous countries. In just the first 100 days of taking office, Trump accomplished more than any president since Franklin Roosevelt. In his first 3 months, President Trump enacted 28 laws, more than double Obama's 11, and the most in more than 60 years. He also signed 30 executive orders, compared to Obama's 19, and even more than Ronald Reagan, who signed 18.
My administration has cut more regulations in a short period of time than any other administration during its entire tenure.
Obama's Asian trade policy, but gave all the advantages to China as they manipulated their currency against the U.S. But that's just the start of President Trump's work to dismantle the destructive legacy that Obama left behind.
As a candidate for president, I promised I would fix this crisis, and I intend to keep that promise one way or the other.
The biggest blow to Barack Hussein Obama's handiwork was when President Trump put an end to the personal mandate to buy health insurance, effectively killing Obamacare. It was a big win for the president and for Americans who were unconstitutionally forced to buy health care at unaffordable prices or face steep and even crippling fines. President Trump also rolled back Obama's infamous Deferred Action for Parents of Americans and Lawful Permanent Residents, also known as...
One by one, we are keeping the promises I made to American people during my campaign for president.
But Obama also built his administration on imposing massive environmental regulations, putting America at a severe disadvantage with international competitors. In his first year, President Trump ordered the Environmental Protection Agency to repeal Obama's Clean Power Plan, a destructive policy set to cost taxpayers up to $73 billion every year. And that's just the cost of the program. It doesn't include the skyrocketing electricity prices as states impose strict requirements for power plants.
It's a great day for American jobs and a historic moment for North America and energy independence.
After saving taxpayers from that onerous burden, President Trump also pulled out of Obama's catastrophic Paris Climate Agreement, which tried to impose devastating and one-sided environmental restrictions on the U.S. Over 190 nations signed the agreement, pledging to slash their greenhouse gas emissions. But the problem was, their CO2 emissions actually went up. China was the biggest culprit, but even in the European Union, countries like France and Germany, which had condemned President Trump for withdrawing, saw their own emissions go up as well. But despite pulling out of the agreement, carbon emissions in the United States actually went down by 0.5%. Clearly, President Trump's energy policies aren't just working for America, they're working for the world as well.
The Paris Climate Accord is simply the latest example of Washington entering into an agreement that disadvantages the United States. to the exclusive benefit of other countries, leaving American workers, who I love, and taxpayers to absorb the cost in terms of lost jobs, lower wages, shuttered factories, and vastly diminished economic production.
Under President Trump's guidance, the former chief of the EPA, Scott Pruitt, rolled back over 30 of Obama's environmental regulations. These regulations were repealed in record time, marking more cutbacks than any other president in the history of the agency. But despite liberals' claims, Trump also is proving to be a big friend to the environment and has signed major public land conversion bills, expanding many national parks across the nation. Since becoming president, Trump has created 5 new national monuments, permanently adding 1.3 million acres of wilderness to America, the largest such bill in over a decade. He also reauthorized the Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund, designating over 350 miles of rivers as wild and scenic, and adding 700,000 new acres for recreation and conservation.
We have among the cleanest and sharpest, crystal clean, you've heard me say it, I went crystal clean, air and water anywhere on earth.
President Trump also set aside 370,000 acres in Montana and as much as 20% of America's population. The court has been a thorn in Trump's side, targeting the president with dozens of lawsuits since he took office, more than any other administration in recent history, with many accusing the liberal judges of ignoring the Constitution and legislating from the bench. In October of 2019, President Trump's 10th appointment to the court was confirmed, bringing the total to 16 Democrats and 13 Republicans.
And I think it's a disgrace when people file, every case gets filed in the Ninth Circuit because they know that's not law, that's not what this country stands for. This was an Obama judge. And I'll tell you what, it's not going to happen like this anymore.
As a result, conservatives are hailing the court's transition as one of President Trump's greatest achievements, predicting it will continue shaping America for years to come. But Trump hasn't stopped at reforming the courts. He's making Americans safer by introducing new legislation to combat crime across the country. In 2017, President Trump signed the Social Security Number Fraud Prevention Act. In less than a year, the number of Americans who reported being victims of identity theft dropped by 40%. The president cracked down on sex trafficking as well, signing a law in 2018 that gives power to states and victims to fight back against online traffickers. Just 1 month after President Trump took office, there were over 1,500 arrests for sex crimes, including trafficking and even pedophilia. Later that year, in just 1 month, authorities arrested over 1,000 suspects in a series of stings designed to target sex traffickers across the nation. That's a sharp contrast to Obama, when according to the FBI, in 2014, there were fewer than 400 sex trafficking arrests in the entire year. Trump also created a task force specifically designed to protect victims and prevent human trafficking. But the mainstream media won't report these facts, giving the president no credit whatsoever for his hard work to save American lives.
I want to thank you for your courage and thank you for helping survivors across our country. And you are not alone. You are not alone. This is a very important day.
Another area President Trump gets absolutely no credit for in the media is his work defending our borders. Despite massive and even violent opposition, President Trump has done more to fight for securing our nation's borders than any president before. In addition to overseeing the construction of new walls all across the southern border, from Texas to Arizona to California and New Mexico, President Trump also approved and secured funding for hundreds of miles more.
There is a humanitarian and security crisis on our southern border that requires urgent action.
In August of 2019, a 14-mile stretch of border in San Diego, California was completed, stretching all the way from the Pacific Ocean to a critical crossing point in Otay Mesa. Border Patrol agents are praising the 30-foot wall, which they say is already proving effective. Officials in San Diego even released footage of how well the wall is working, showing illegal aliens attempting and failing to sneak over the border and into the U.S. President Trump promised that 450 miles of border wall would be finished by the end of 2020. And according to the Border Patrol, as of January 5th, 2021, some 452 miles have been completed. Agents have long argued that border walls aren't just effective at deterring illegal immigration, they are absolutely essential.
Anywhere that you look where we have built walls, they have worked. They have been an absolute necessity for Border Patrol agents in securing the border. We need those physical barriers, and we appreciate President Trump and all of his efforts in getting us those physical barriers.
From May to June of 2019, arrests at the southern border fell by nearly 30%, and then another 24% from June to July. That's over a 50% decrease in arrests in just 2 months. The sharp drop comes after Mexico scrambled to crack down on their side of the border, but only after President Trump threatened to impose massive tariffs if they didn't cooperate. After deploying tens of thousands of soldiers to protect their border, President Trump praised Mexico, saying that Mexicans are doing a lot more to help America's southern border than the Democrats are. Another factor involves Trump's rollout of the Migration Protection Protocols, which forces illegal aliens to remain on their side of the border while they wait for immigration hearings. Which means human smugglers, sex traffickers, drug cartel, gang members, and even terrorists have all been stopped dead at the border, thanks to President Trump's efforts. After Trump took office in 2017, there was a 42% increase in arrests at the border, and 230,000 illegal aliens were removed from the United States.
The radical left can never control our borders. I will never let it happen. Walls are not immoral. In fact, they are the opposite of immoral because they will save many lives and stop drugs from pouring into our country.
In 2018 alone, over 3,000 children were saved from exploitation by illegals at the border, and nearly 4,000 gang members were put behind bars. President Trump even created the Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement Office, or VOICE, where victims of crime by illegal aliens could go to find support. He also passed legislation restricting green cards for immigrants who don't contribute to our nation, and instead just live on public benefits like food stamps and Medicaid. And thanks to Trump's new administration at the IRS, some major loopholes that left the door wide open for non-citizens and even illegal aliens to commit fraud and claim massive refunds have finally been closed. That means Trump is saving Americans tens of billions of dollars every year that used to go to illegal aliens under President Obama. These numbers speak for themselves. President Trump isn't just making empty promises. He's fighting hard to protect American communities and keep us safe. That includes the military, which has seen a complete overhaul under President Trump. Promising to revitalize our nation's armed forces, Trump secured a big boost in military spending, $740 billion for 2020, up from $611 billion in 2016. President Trump also followed through on his promise to hold NATO to task on its spending, calling on our allies to pay their fair share. As a result, every member state has increased its defense spending, growing by 5% in 2017 alone and totaling $42 billion more than during Obama's last year in office. He also issued an executive order to keep the detention facility at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, open, keeping dangerous criminals and terrorists off of America's shores. He pushed to update our nation's nuclear arsenal, released the first new plan to deter cyber attacks in over 15 years, and prepared a strategy on national biodefense to protect Americans from a biological attack. Anticipating future threats down the road, President Trump also did something that had never been done before. He took America's frontier to outer space, creating the sixth branch of the U.S. military, the Space Force. It was a historic move, the first of its kind in the world, designed to ensure America's sovereignty in space and protect our nation by keeping the U.S. one step ahead of our enemies. Some 16,000 Air Force personnel now represent the first line of defense against a war above America's skies, with thousands more to follow. General John Raymond, who will command the Space Force, says the new branch will focus on gathering intelligence and detecting threats like missile launches, making it absolutely essential to our national security. The president also focused on upgrading our nation's military equipment as well, pushing to build hundreds of new warships and rearm and rebuild our Air Force with the latest cutting-edge planes and technology. President Trump also approved the biggest military pay raise in a decade, ensuring our brave men and women in uniform are taken care of. But care for our servicemen and women doesn't stop after they leave the military. President Trump vowed to reform the Department of Veterans Affairs, and that's exactly what he did. Trump signed the VA Accountability Act, expanded health services over the phone, improved walk-in clinics, and same-day urgent care for veterans. He also signed protections for whistleblowers to enhance accountability and approved sweeping legislation with $86.5 billion in new funding, the biggest funding increase in the agency's history. The president passed the VA Mission Act as well, revamping the agency by strengthening its care programs, giving more funding to the Veterans Choice Program, improving the training of healthcare workers, and modernizing its equipment and facilities. But he's not just taking care of veterans. President Trump is also focused on healthcare for the rest of America as well. Under his leadership, the FDA is getting new records for generic drug approvals, saving consumers $9 billion in 2017 alone. He also released a plan to keep drug prices down, which was so effective, major drug companies decided to freeze or even lower the cost of their drugs. The president expanded short-term health plans and gave employers the ability to form their own health plans, making it more affordable to provide their employees with health insurance. Billions of dollars have been invested in rural health care since 2017, giving people living outside major towns or cities better access to quality care. Next, President Trump did away with Obama's infamous death panels, repealing the Independent Payment Advisory Board. President Trump also signed an executive order giving consumers more choices and better access to lower-cost insurance, a move that dramatically improved health care options for millions of Americans. Seniors are better protected under President Trump as well, after he reformed Medicare, saving them over $320 billion on drugs in 2018 alone. And before the Chinese virus and Democrats sent America's economy into a tailspin, President Trump created one of the strongest economies our nation has ever seen.
The U.S. economy is growing almost twice as fast today as when I took office, and we are considered far and away the hottest economy anywhere in the world.
When President Trump took over at the start of 2017, the economy was recovering from the Great Recession, but it was still in pretty bad shape. Throughout the entire 8 years Obama was president, national growth peaked at just 2.9%. While in just 2 short years, President Trump has grown the economy to over 4%, something Democrats and even Obama said simply couldn't be done. But Trump didn't stop there. After Election Day in 2016, the Dow Jones sat at 18,589 points, never managing to hit the 20,000 mark during Obama's entire presidency. Just 1 year later, President Trump had not only broken through the 20,000 barrier, but the Dow was at nearly 24,000, then an all-time high. And even after the stock market crashed 35% during the Chinese pandemic, President Trump was able to turn it around. And in November of 2020, the Dow Jones peaked at over 30,000 points for the first time ever.
In just over 2 years since the election, we have launched an unprecedented economic boom, a boom that has rarely been seen before. There's been nothing like it under decades. And growing for blue-collar workers, who I promised to fight for, they're growing faster than anyone else thought possible. Nearly 5 million Americans have been lifted off food stamps.
President Trump also signed the $867 billion farm bill, doubling the number of farmers who are authorized to borrow
country in large numbers, thanks to our historic reductions in taxes and regulations.
President Trump has also worked to fix the broken tax code, cutting special interest tax breaks and shutting down loopholes for the wealthy. His new tax plan boosted business investments by 40% in 2018 alone, as economists gained confidence in the market. And under President Trump's administration, America is now leading the world in energy production. Trump slashed regulations from Obama that were hamstringing America's energy markets, opening the door for new refineries, including 77 million acres in the Gulf of Mexico for oil and gas drilling. American energy is surging to record numbers, surpassing Russia and even Saudi Arabia in 2018 to become the world's largest producer of crude oil.
And we have unleashed a revolution in American energy. The United States is now the #1 producer of oil and natural gas anywhere in the world. And now, for the first time in 65 years, we are a net exporter of energy.
But the battle for the economy goes beyond America's border, and President Trump is fighting to reform international trade deals such as the catastrophic NAFTA agreement. 25 years after it was created, the North American Free Trade Agreement resulted in massive layoffs and wage stagnation, which was a ticking time bomb, bringing the two nations to the brink of war. President Trump has changed all that. And though the road to peace is still a long one, there's more hope than ever before that North Korea and the United States can finally find some common ground. The hostile dictatorship is finally showing signs of opening the doors to warmer relations, leading to a historic summit between President Trump and Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un. And despite years of demonizing from Democrats, Trump has also worked hard to smooth out U.S. relations with Russia. Moscow has become the go-to scapegoat for Democrats anytime they lose an election or get caught in some new scandal. But it's also one of the biggest global powers on the world stage. As one of America's chief military and economic competitors, it only makes sense for our president to try and achieve peaceful relations with Russia. After all, provoking a war with the country with the most nuclear weapons in the world can't end well for anyone. And unlike Obama, President Trump finally took a hard line with Iran. After pulling the U.S. out of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, what the president called the worst deal in history, Trump has called for tougher and tougher sanctions to stop the Islamic Republic from getting its hands on atomic weapons. While there's still a tough path forward, President Trump never put America in the back seat and let Iran call the shots, as Obama did. Considered a disaster by most, Obama's handling of the conflict in Iraq led to more sectarian violence, with many directly crediting his lack of leadership as paving the way for the rise of the Islamic State. President Trump has had no such problems. While Obama predicted the war in Iraq would last for years, President Trump worked hard to remove nearly all U.S. forces from the country, leaving only a bare minimum on duty.
One who has caused so much hardship and death has violently been eliminated. He will never again harm another innocent man, woman, or child. The world is now a much safer